Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card-holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam Button. Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Architect, and Quiver. Today, I have one of my favorite people in the entire Magic community and one of the people who I've always been kind of like super starstruck to talk to, but has become my friend over the past, decade or so, and probably one of the most important people in Magic. Frankly, I'm just going to be straight up. He's here, but I don't care. I'm going to say it right now. If there should be a Hall of Fame for people who aren't Pro Tour players, and it should be called the Brian David Marshall Hall of Fame. And that's why I'm talking to Brian David Marshall right now, Pro Tour Historian Emeritus, also just like part of every major thing that's ever happened in Magic ever. Hey, BDM, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. You're gonna make me cry, Shiv. Yeah, you will. Honestly, I'm always very close to it at any given moment, so it's not hard, but you might.
Dude, I'll be honest. I've been following Magic since. I had long gaps of playing Magic, but I always read and followed Magic as a kid, and like not even as kids, like as in college when the Magic the Gathering website started, and like you used to write a column every week, like the week that was, and you would talk about the tournaments and everything, and I didn't even play Magic, and I would still just read them like excessively, like my favorite sports columns or whatever. You're the reason like I know all of my favorite players, and then also. One of my favorite things when streaming would start and you would get to do the interview with like the Pro Tour winner, you could tell that was like one of the best prizes anybody could get besides just like the big trophy. It was like, oh my God, I got the BDM interview. And I don't know, like when I first saw you in person in like wandering the top 8 of Worlds in 2012 or whatever it was in San Francisco. And I was just like, holy shit, that's BDM. Oh, whoops. I'm going to have to edit myself there. But yeah, I was just like, oh my God, he's like real and walking around. But you were also in the top 8, so I wasn't about to go and like shake your hand. So I'm glad that over the course of the next X years or whatever, I got to know you and we've gotten to become friends because you're rad and you've done like everything in Magic.
Well, you're rad, and Twitter, and we crap on Twitter a lot, but like one of the things that's great about Twitter is it allowed us to sort of go on trajectories that meant that we would seek each other out and talk at events, and and it's been pretty cool to get to know you through your Twitter presence, and then to actually hang out to the point where I was in San Francisco recently, and you recognized me from my stance, which is super weird, like in a cool way, right? I had no idea. I've been conscious of my stance since.
Yeah, so we were both at the Game Developers Conference, and you've got this very specific BDM way of standing when you're not doing anything. Like your hands are just kind of at your belt level, like kind of this sort of roundish shape around you, and then your legs just look like you're about to get on or just got off riding a horse. Like they just kind of bow and arch in a specific way, and you're planted, and you're like, I am not moving for anyone. And it is a very BDM way of standing. Like it was so wild because I was just... I had parked my car and I was walking over to just the park to go and hang out with whoever my friends and stuff were. And I'm like, I know that backside very well.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think that's like that's probably like my interview stance, right? Like I would be very conscious of planting, I'm very fidgety.
Yeah.
And so like I really had to teach myself how to like plant myself, be centered, and be present, right? Yeah. And it's very, it requires a lot of will for me to do that.
It looked exactly like the type of pose you would take if you're like, I am planting myself here and no part of my body is going to move. And I was just like, this is like, But yeah, you were like talking to someone and I'm just like, I run over, I'm like, I know that, I know the back of that head and I know the way that plant is. I'm like, oh, that's BDM right there. It was rad, man. It was
that was awesome. That was really funny. And it was really helpful to me because I was I was pitching someone on something, and then someone comes over and was like, "Hey, I know you." So that was actually
Yeah, I mean,
bonus points.
it's like, oh wow, you have that kind of street rec that people can just see your back and know that you're there. No, it was so super cool, and it was cool to see you there too. And like, I remember like a few years ago, you would come to GDC as well, and we got to sit down and play with Eric Klugs Cube, the Pro
Oh
Tour
yeah,
cube that he did. And it was rad because like you introduced me to a bunch of people who lived in the Bay Area that I didn't even realize were here, like Klug and like Drew Levin and whatever. And then getting to actually play with Zvi was like, well, I learned why he is a Hall of Famer and I'm not. um,
right. I think Zvi had cards from his actual Pro Tour winning deck in his draft deck in
oh
the with
yeah,
the
dude,
Pro Tour cube, right?
it was wild because like I had drafted and I had no idea what I was doing with that. The first time I'd ever seen the cube, and obviously I haven't played with like Invasion Block Standard or whatever the hell was like the Pro Tour at the time. And he like I sit down against him and he looks at my deck and he's like, "Let me see your hand." And I'm like, okay, here." And he's like, "Okay, well you're gonna lose in 2 turns." And I'm like, "Fair." But I trust you. And he's like, "Yeah, because I won the Pro Tour with those 3 cards." I'm like, "Oh, well." I'm like, you know what, man? I I'll take it.
I love that cube, by the way. I
Yeah, it's so
really
cool.
I think it's so cool, and it is. I'm starting to think about building the cube for the first time.
Mm,
I've never actually seriously done it. I've obviously, you always think, oh, I build a cube, but like I'm actually trying to build an extended cube right now,
mm.
which sort of captures the vibe of the extended format.
What
And
era of extended though? Like,
well, that's
didn't
the
that?
idea, that. So I believe I'm gonna trim off the dual land era of extended, or at least trim the dual lands out of that era of extended.
Mm,
And then I think whatever that last iteration, basically no 3-color cards are going to be in the
mm.
cube. So I'm going to cut anything that gets up. I think maybe it gets up towards Khan's block or something. I forget where it ends exactly, but
Extended
it
didn't
ends
go
with,
that high, did it?
yeah. There's just some 3-color card. No, it doesn't go that high.
No, it went to
I'm
like
just thinking about
Alara maybe.
maybe, but I think the idea is to just get rid of whatever set Savage Lands and that whole cycle of Tri Lands was
Yeah,
in.
that was a Lara block.
Lara block, yeah. So I think probably trimming a Lara block era as well. I think I want it to be very much uh
Louis Scott Vargas elves.
well, that would certainly be in there, right? But
Mm.
yeah, but yeah, more of a 2-color format than a 3-color format. And if you want to go crazy and build the 5-color, you can. But I
I
think I
think
want to make it a little
honestly,
harder.
the more I draft and stuff, the more I realize I just like 2 color better than three. Like three
Yeah,
color is fun sometimes, but then the land math gets really gross, and then it's just not fun. And you're just like, "Mm,
that's what I don't love about cube sometimes is the overemphasis on drafting the mana and
mm,
not as much emphasis on this is a cool card, I want to play it. These are
yeah,
two cool cards, I want to pair them. So I think, yeah, maybe cutting away some of that 3-color element
yeah,
will push it anyway. But anyway, Klug's cube is sort of like a north star for me on this, because it also says to me you don't need to be balanced like
oh yeah,
completely. You don't need to have like I have 80 blue creatures, I have 80 black creatures, I have no. Let's do a core sample of the extended format. Let's just dig in, take that out, and that's what we'll use to populate this. And if you don't know what Klug's Pro Tour cube is, it's one of every card that's ever been in a Pro Tour winning deck
yeah,
constructed. It's
yes.
super cool.
So there's a lot of really good mono red in there.
I got to pull off Cadaverous Bloom once with
Oh
that cube.
god, I
I
love
got all
Cad
the
Bloom so
pieces
much.
for Cad Bloom. Yeah.
You know, that's one of my secret like EDH decks that I really, really want to build one day is like a Cad Bloom deck that runs that old school combo. And I'm just like, I don't know if you can or not, but that card is really broken. And like you can do stupid things with it. Um
Yeah.
so but that I guess is a good segue into like were you around during the Cad Bloom era and like did you see like those type of games when that was a really popular thing with like just what's the name, Long cheating and putting it in a glass and all that.
I wasn't, so that was Pro Tour Paris. I wasn't at Pro Tour Paris. I didn't actually. I had actually never left the country until year 2000.
That's
It was the
wild.
first time I ever traveled outside of the U.S. Um, I would go to a lot of the domestic pro tours because we sponsored players, and
Mm.
I had a bunch of players. But I actually worked on a Cad Bloom deck for that pro tour with Sean Fleischman and Ben Bleiweiss.
Mm.
So
Star
we
City's
were,
Ben Bleiweiss.
yeah, it used to be Neutral Grounds Ben Bleiweiss at the time.
Man, there's a lot of people who've come through neutral ground.
Yeah. So we had a store. Sean Fleischman and Ben both worked at the store. Sean was coming off of second place, I guess, at Pro Tour Columbus, and we were working. It's probably not directly off, but close enough. And we were working to get him a Cad Bloom list that was, and it was good. That deck was crazy, and it was really the beginning of, I remember, almost like the group mind deck building experience, because
Mm.
people were talking about the deck on the Usenet groups and people were theorizing about the deck because there were a lot of moving parts to it, and
Yeah.
trying to find the right tricks and card selection tools and card draw tools and all those things was really challenging.
I'm going to just kind of summarize this for all the young kids who are much younger than Bronze Bloom. So, Cadaverous Bloom was a card from Mirage, which was 3 black green, and it was said it was an enchantment that to choose a card in your hand and exile it. And if you do, you can add either black, black, or green, green to your mana pool. And then in that deck was also Squandered Resources, which was a black green enchantment that said sack a land and add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color that that thing could produce. And Prosperity, which is X and a blue, each player draws X cards. So the whole point is you generate a crap ton of mana, you draw a ton of cards, and then you mill everybody out, or something to that effect, right?
Yep, that is pretty much it.
Yeah, like
Um,
it was pretty busted at the time.
yeah, and there were also a bunch of like, is it Infernal Contract? Is that the
Uh,
card which let you pay half your life? I don't remember all the
yeah, it
card
was
names.
Infernal Contract. Draw 4 cards and yeah, draw 4 cards and lose half your life. Like what?
But what was crazy back then is
Oh yeah, you could
you
also win
didn't
through drain life, I guess.
yeah, but you didn't die until the end of phase.
Right.
So if um you could basically pay all the life you wanted to pay. You could, you could just go down below zero,
Yeah.
uh, the way the game used to work, and you wouldn't die until the end of the phase. So you could keep like using those infernal contracts or whatever else, and then
Limdul's fault.
yeah, yes, Limdul's Vault, and you would basically try to uh, find a squad of resources that would, something that would let you. I mean, a prosperity that would let you kill your opponent or
Yeah.
drain life
Drain
them or do
life.
whatever it is you needed to do.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. I mean, there were cards in there like Meditate, which is a card that just miserable. It's a instant. Skip your next
I
turn, draw
love
4 cards.
meditate.
Like
I
this
love
deck,
meditate.
yeah, this deck was definitely one of those old decks, which is just like, look, it doesn't matter. Whatever you need to do to win, do it. It
Yeah,
absolutely doesn't work in the rules these days because you would die halfway through the
yeah.
combo.
You really can't. You need like the absolute perfect corridor to
Yeah,
run down to make the deck work under modern rule sets.
yeah, it was a nasty, nasty. It was like one of those things. The first time I played against a Pros Bloom deck, and I'm just sitting here with my tribal Merfolk or whatever the hell, and I'm like, "What are you even doing? What is going on? Why are you drawing all these cards? Oh my god, how did you win? What the hell just happened?" That's like the best kind of old school combo where you're just like, I don't know where this came from. I don't know what kind of like sick mind came up with this. But like it turned out that was like the combo that taught me it doesn't matter how many resources you have as long as you have one more than the other guy does at
Yeah,
the end of the day, right? Like
yeah, and yeah, no, it was cool. Like I said, it was definitely something that felt like it's certainly the first time I remember, new cards being introduced into the environment and people all sort of thinking along, as a group starting to, not with the speed we see today, right? Like
Oh yeah.
this deck would be at the pre-release. It would be, early access streamers would be like killing each other,
Oh yeah.
boom, boom, boom,
No, back
but
then, like, we didn't even have like message boards, man. It was literally meeting people at the store and talking about cards.
and you had to play your cards physically, right? There
Yeah.
wasn't there were no Magic Online yet. Magic Online is still 4 or 5 years away.
Oh yeah. And it was wild because like there were times, I mean, that was the era where you could literally sit down and play and see cards you've never seen before, never heard of before, from a set that you bought cards out of because you didn't have a list or any idea of what's going on. It would just, if you pulled it, you pulled it. If not, GG's. And
I,
oh man, it was a wild west.
I still remember Pro Tour 1, which was in New York. And so there were a lot of people in town at Neutral Ground before. It's about a mile from where Neutral Ground was located, was the venue. So there were a lot of people coming in, buying cards, hanging out, play testing. And I remember some guy came in, and we were all building decks for people who were playing in the tournament. And someone came in with a deck built around Necropotence. And literally, Necropotence is a card that was considered, by Inquest
Unplayable.
magazine very famously to be the worst card in Ice Age, uh, and largely disregarded by players who, had been around the set for a while. And then this guy came in and he's like playing Necropotence, and he's just like Necro, and he wasn't playing the Necro deck that we would come to know after that tournament, but he was
Yeah.
just like ritualing and Lake of the Deading and playing out a million Pump Knights, and he was just like using it as like almost like a fair card. Like, I'm going to draw 5 cards at the end of the turn. I'm going to play a bunch more cards to the board. I'll just out resource you through
Yeah.
this card and just pay life to draw those cards. And I was like, holy crap, this card's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it was just that draw. And then then that weekend we see Necropotence win the Juniors Pro Tour, top 8 the Seniors Pro Tour, and then just become the dominant, most miserable,
One of the strongest cards of all time.
most omnipresent standard decks.
Oh my god, dude! Necro Winter,
for months.
baby.
Yeah,
Necro Summer. Well, I don't know what it was, but it was like
it was
a
summer,
timestamp.
winter, fall, and spring. It
Yeah,
lasted a long
it
time.
was like when they figured out how to use Necro. Like, dude, when we saw it, this card looked miserable. It's like, what do you mean I have to skip my draw and then exile my cards? What? This is garbage. No, it turns out paying a bunch of life and then just picking the best 7 cards out of that is insane. It's just,
But it was also like time delayed, right? Because
oh
you'd do
yeah,
it, you'd set the
you do it in your
card
end step.
aside, you draw them in your end. Yeah, you put them in your hand in your end step. So
It
what
was,
the card seemed like had a lot of text at a time where a lot of text on a Magic card,
yeah.
Was usually Ice Cauldron.
Or Balduvian Shaman, right? Like,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
some garbage that you're like, yeah, it was like in tiny 3-point font, and people are like, I'm not reading all that. But if you did, you're like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Oh
It
man.
was pretty wild to watch. It just became, it just became the deck to play or beat, right? Like it
Yeah,
was one of those first decks. Magic had been so vast before Necropotence, right? Like
right.
there were just a million things you could do. And that was the first time in Magic that it felt like, oh, that's either the thing I have to do or the thing I have to do something about. And
Yeah.
those were your sort of 2 options going into competitive Magic at that point.
I think in today's Magic, that card would have been banned like a tournament later. Like, it would have been gone because it was so omnipresent. But I mean, that was before Magic was really organized like that. It was like we were still playing on the sidewalks and streets. Nobody would have paid attention to a ban list. But it was just such a turn 1 Dark Ritual of Necropotence was just stupid. And you're like,
Yeah.
what do you do now? It's like, pray for your disenchant. Why are you even playing white? White sucks.
Right.
Like, it's just not going to happen.
Sorry about my beep there.
Oh, I was like, oh no, what happened to your microphone?
No. It's my I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I have an insulin pump. So it's just alerting me that
It's like,
I
hey,
needed
we're
to
gonna
be
shoot
alert.
some sugar into you.
Yeah.
Cool.
The
Man, thank
opposite
God.
of how the treatment for diabetes generally works there. So,
Yeah, fair. Look, we are grateful for insulin pumps, right? Like that,
yeah,
you could have to be shooting yourself all the time. That's much
yeah,
less fun.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so what would you say are some of the more memorable like pro tours or decks that you've seen in that early era of Magic? Like you went to a lot of pro tours, both as a store owner and then later on as like a report. Like when did you start doing this for WotC again? Or like as a reportery type
Sure.
person?
I started doing coverage of events in the late 90s for my store.
Right.
So, we uh, used to run an event series called the Grudge Match, which
Mm.
was neutral ground versus your move games. So we would hold a series of tournaments. Your move games would hold a series of tournaments. Ultimately, each store would, over the course of those tournaments, produce a champion. And then those two champions would meet at a pro tour and play each other. And that would be the Grudge Match title.
Mm.
And so, um,
Man, talk about two just like powerhouse stores too. Your Move Games and like Nutrigram both made numerous Hall of Famers and like some of the
yeah,
best players of all time come out of there.
yeah. And
That's wild.
it was an amazing time because this is like invasion block standard
Mm.
era. And, this is a tournament series that, tons of players like really blossomed in, like most of the people that you would think of as target guys,
Hmm.
Osip and Pat Sullivan and, Eugene Harvey and that whole crowd, they would show up every weekend to play in a grudge match event. They were
Yeah.
constantly building stuff. And so we
Like
really
Your Move
became,
was based in Boston, right?
yeah, they're in the Boston, they're in Somerville, but yeah,
Yeah,
Boston
somewhere like
area.
so it basically became like a whole northeast corner of America kind of like circuit there.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
what we would do, for what I would do for the Neutral Ground website is I basically had a sign when you signed up and created your deck sheet, your deck registration. I was like, you may not withhold your deck list.
Hmm.
Because at that time there was always like this thing, like people are like, I don't want to publish my deck. I was like, if you're playing and you win, we're publishing your deck list. And by the way, we're probably publishing your deck list if you don't win, because we're just putting up deck lists. So
Yeah.
we were really that first um, content
Like
site that was like here is not only all the decks, but we created a system. I mean, it's pretty used widely now, but where we outputted the DCI match data,
hmm.
correlated deck archetypes by DCI numbers, and we're able to figure out all the matchups for all the decks. Like this deck did
Jeez.
this well, and so we would publish that information every week. We would write a little. I would write a little summary, and that's what got me started doing, really creating content and sort of telling the story around both a social and competitive Magic scene, right? Because
Right.
the Grudge Match was both, right?
Right.
And then early 2000s, I started working for Sideboard, and then 2003, just after I had sold Neutral Ground, Aaron Forsyth invited me to write for Daily MTG, which eventually turned into the week that was. I
Yeah.
started, I think, doing deconstructing famous decks,
Right.
and then right in there, they were like, I was qualified for a bunch of pro tours, for team pro tours, and did not do well at them. After I think finished 11th or 13th in New York in 2001, which on rating got us qualified for multiple more pro tours. But I would bomb out inevitably, they'd be like, "Oh, excellent! Vetted website writer is now out of tournament. Come do coverage of the top eight." So I think I started doing coverage like in 2002, somewhere in there, probably at Pro Tour Boston that year.
Mm. So with that in mind, you've seen like the rise and fall of so many different archetypes and so many different types of players and like just different groups and eras of Magic. You've been through like the whole gamut, right? Like, didn't Finkel play at your store?
He did. He did.
Like as a kid?
Yeah, Finkel would. And if you ever read the book Johnny Magic and the Card
Yeah, it
Sharp
was a
Kids,
great book. I enjoyed it a lot.
John would come to Neutral Ground, play. We'd close. And by the way, when we closed, it was like 2 a.m. Right? Like we would just because we would just stay there. Even if we closed at midnight, we would just be like hanging out, playing Magic. We'd go to a diner, we'd play Magic at the diner, right? Like, it was like there was just like this, still that like I just want to do this and hang out with these people. Um, and as what it turned out, we found out years later is that John would go sleep in Penn Station rather than go home. Like
What?
sleep on a yeah, just like
Oh, that's
and then come
gross.
back to neutral ground in the morning when we opened, which was crazy to me. Yeah, I mean, amazing, an amazing story. John is someone who's like I think just known as so pragmatic and so practical, and like it
Oh yeah.
feels like almost opposite. But I guess maybe he's just like I just need to get maximum playing time in
Yeah, I mean, I guess
at a
this
time
is
where
what I
that was
want
how
to
you
do.
practiced.
Yeah, I mean, look, if this is what you want to do, he's like, look, it's more efficient for me to just sleep here than to go home, turn around, come back in the morning. I save money on the subway, whatever. Here we are. There's a
Yeah,
bench, GG's. But
yeah,
that's also like, that shows you like the grasp that Magic had on us back in the 90s, man. Like, we had never seen anything like this. This game was just so compelling and so fun. It took over your whole I mean, I say that as if it doesn't do it now, but
right.
like we didn't have anything like this before. Like
No,
those of us who were young nerds at the time were just like, this is all I want to do. And
yeah.
yeah.
I, I mean, I guess to some extent, right?
I
Like
mean, didn't you find
Dungeons
Zvi
and
like locked
Dragons.
in your store?
What's that?
Didn't you
Oh
find
yeah,
Zvi like
Zvi definitely did the mixed up files of Mrs. Terwilliger in neutral ground over like the Christmas break. We would close one day a year, literally. We would
yeah.
close on Christmas Day. That was the only day we closed. And if we could have found people to stay open, we probably would have stayed open that day too. Because we're in New York, we know that not everybody celebrates the same holidays.
Yeah.
you know, so um, and so Christmas Eve to Boxing Day morning, we was one of the largest windows time we were closed. Yeah, and Zvi ended up, whether it was I have to believe it was by his own sort of design, but I guess it's possible that it wasn't. Ended up locked in neutral ground over the weekend, and just opened Magic Packs candy bars and left some money and ran out when Sean McEwen opened the store on that next day.
Oh my god. I wish I could have been there, man. That would have been such a cool environment to grow up in.
Yeah, it
But
was pretty crazy.
yeah, but you were saying yeah, we've never seen anything like this before. It's just wild.
I was gonna say D and D. I think
I think D&D was
certainly
close, yeah.
it had a similar grasp on I think individuals and like play groups, but like there's something about Magic that forced you to constantly reshuffle who you knew, and you know what I mean. Like you were playing different people, and it was quick, and you could make an
Yeah.
adjustment, and so it forced you a little bit out of your comfort zone. Um, where D&D, was just like, okay, we're just going to form this pod of people and we're going to
Right.
play. And people might drift in or out, but it's almost a more traditional. It's like a poker group or
Exactly that.
anything else. Yeah,
Like I was hardcore into D&D. That's how I got into Magic in the first place,
yeah,
and I was super addicted to D&D, but D&D is kind of insular. It's kind of like, and plus you play a game of D&D and you kind of go, you can go for a long time playing a session of D&D, but there's a point where you're just like, okay, well, we're done for the day. And like Magic is like when I finish a game, I can jump into another game. Like
yep.
you could chain Magic and go for a long time,
Oh yeah,
as
you
opposed
could
to like
chase.
D&D, there's a
You
point where
can
you
chase
binge stuff.
a palate cleanser game.
Yeah. It's
The
just like
so-called bad idea draft.
or it's just like, man, I just got crushed. I need to win so I can just
Yeah,
feel good and then go home. And then you're just getting wrecked.
that is the fuel for the bad idea draft. You know,
Yeah.
that,
I mean, like, okay, I need to ask you a question because you were around during that time. Do you remember Rochester drafts? Like, did
of
you guys
course.
ever do that at stores?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first Pro Tour was Pro Tour Los Angeles, the second one, I guess, which was Rochester Draft. And
God.
so um, we would we practiced a ton of Rochester Draft leading up to that, with, you know,
It,
again, drafting with John and Steve O'Mahony Schwartz and, all of these people who would go on to become, you know,
Hall of Famers.
either Hall of Famers or pro tour historians.
Yeah. Like I said at the top of the show, man. But dude, Rochester Draft, which is basically for those of you who've never had the blessing of playing Rochester, is you crack open all the packs in the set, lay them out. So you lay them out one pack at a time, all 15 cards face up, and then you go around the table and take one card, open information, and you have to memorize every pick that everyone's taking. It is so slow. It is so slow and onerous, and you have to have such a good memory. And it's so easy to get
and
trashed, man.
and you're staring across the table at your first round opponent.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, I would be playing a person 4 seats away from me. So we're paying I'm like, I kind of know what everybody's doing. Right. Because you can, if you're going to
Yeah.
make your way through the pod, but your mission is, I got to beat this person first, and then I can keep going. And so there's a lot of jockeying that would go on in the draft, and a lot of like elbows being thrown from players to each side of you as everyone tries to either cooperate or not cooperate. You would see like these pretty like crazy. If you ever find the coverage for the Pro Tour Los Angeles that Steve O'Mahony Schwartz won, he is in a row of players who all know each other. I think it's John Finkel, Steve O'Mahony Schwartz, Worth Wolpert, and there's a 4th player, and I don't remember. I think it's another dead guy, but I'm not sure. Team name, not person dead. And everybody just cooperated, right? Because they knew each other, and they wanted everyone to just get the best. And so Steve ends up with this insane deck, and not any kind of collusion or anything like that. Just simply like, look, this is the right gameplay here. If we all cooperate in some way, and again, this is all unspoken,
decks, right?
We'll all have playable decks. Patrick Chapin is at that table, and he's on the other side of the table, and he's in the middle of like, I guess it's Mike Long, him, and he's just like sitting there watching this dream like pod just unfolding on this side of the table, and just people are just punching each other in the face on his side of the table. Like it's just a train wreck. And he just he just describes it as just really horrifying to watch for himself.
Oh yeah,
because he just can't get a great deck.
And in a Rochester draft, hate drafting is like real. Like you're staring in the eye at the guy as you take the card you know is going to be perfect for their deck. And it's just like, yeah, what are you going to do? I cracked open the rare. It's not in my colors. I don't care. You don't get it.
It is. There's a lot of contention around, when it was correct to hate draft.
Oh god.
And certainly there were times where it was. Yeah.
I'm so glad we shifted over to just normal draft.
Yeah. And then there was of course Team Rochester Draft as well.
Team Rochester is just like, that is just like collusion, but on board collusion. Like we are here, we know we're colluding together. But Team Rochester is got to be the most complicated and miserable draft format.
No one will play it with me.
Hell no.
I can't get anyone to play it with me. It's like one of my favorite. I really love it. It's probably, I think if I had to like rank formats I'm good at, the drafting portion of Team Rochester.
Oh my god.
I'm really good at. And
so Team Rochester means that you got to so it's 3-on-3, right?
3-on-3. So my team is sitting here, your team is sitting there. Not like team draft, or what
so
people think of as money drafting. No, not alternating. So it's 3 and then 3. And then I forget where the draft starts, but it starts with one player on one of the sides for a team. They open a pack like you described, and then the pick order goes around the table. So they pick one. I guess the middle player picks first. They pick one. Person to their left or right, whichever way it's going, picks one. Then you get 3 picks on your team. Then there's one player left on their team. That player gets the wheel. They make 2 picks, and then it comes back around. And so there's a lot of, and you only play one person in this format. You play and so middle player plays middle player, and then everyone plays the other
Sure.
two players play diagonally. So you are constantly shifting up your deck. This is where hate draft really. This is a format about hate drafting. It's about
Oh
drafting
gosh.
sideboard cards that you're going to main deck. It's about getting your island walkers in against the islands. It's
Uh-huh.
about like making sure like look that guy's getting the wheel. You can't let this card. This card destroys me. Over here you've got to hate draft that. You
It
know,
is it is such a I mean, the thing is Rochester Draft is fun to watch. Like that kind of Rochester Draft is super
the
fun to watch.
numbers don't bear that out.
No,
Shivam.
I mean if you're like high level, if you're
Oh yeah,
deeply
yes.
invested, it's really interesting to watch. But boy, howdy, it is hard to explain to someone what's going on, and it's fun to play. But God, it is an
It's
era of
it's
Magic that we couldn't get away with now. I don't think
no, it's a lot of
it's so
work
slow.
and time for a very small amount of Magic play,
Yeah, I
right?
think when they discovered normal drafting, people were just like, "Oh, this is just better in every way."
No, normal drafting already existed. Normal
Dude,
drafting
why the hell
existed
did they do
before.
Why did
I
they do Rochester?
Racha. It was just I think to um, introduce a different way to play. It was just like the
I
same way
guess.
there's different constructed formats and same. It was like standard and block constructed. There was booster and there was Rochester. That
Mm,
was kind of. I guess we never actually got standard as a pro tour format very often. So
not
it was
early.
always yeah no.
Yeah, I mean, there was
Back
always like
then.
block constructed. It felt like, or draft, and then I don't know. I wish we had more sealed pro tours. I love sealed. Sealed is my favorite way to play. Um, which is actually leads me into one of the things that you created, which is now my actual favorite way to play, which is boxing league,
Oh my god,
which is
I love it so much.
God, it's so good. Just it's sealed deck, but as a full box. But you're making a commander deck, and so it's great. It's limited. It forces you to play garbage cards, and it forces you to. It lets you experience all the mechanics of a set and actually get to do them. And that's like my favorite thing to do.
And sometimes do some degenerate stuff that
Oh
makes
yeah,
that makes Commander so compelling. But then, like you said, also you have some fill. You have like this that's a 2/2 life link for two. Yes, it
you know.
is. We're just getting in there.
Look, man,
Um,
28th pick in the draft. You got to fill up this deck. You got
yeah,
100 cards to fill. Okay.
it was really heartening for me at Grand Prix Minneapolis at MagicCon Minneapolis.
Mm,
Um, that a lot of players had boxing league decks. They're like, oh, can we play? And it was kind of amazing. It is to me the perfect distillation of Commander in the sense that you have no power level issues to worry about.
yes.
You have there's no power level discussion that needs to be had at all, right?
Unless you're
It's
playing Throne of Eldraine, or no, Ikoria. Ikoria was a
Ikoria,
boxing one.
but then everyone knows who to kill.
Yeah.
It's fine, right? It actually is like yes, Ikoria is really good in Commander Boxing League, but it
Yeah.
also is. It's still not. You're still not going to win on turn two, right? You're
Right.
still not going to
Yeah,
Olivia
and
the
like
table. You know what I mean?
and
Like
there's no soul rings, there's no mana crypts, there's
yeah,
none of the problem cards are in your set. Like it's even if the card like my favorite set was Theros Beyond Death to play with Boxing League because I love Enchantress and I love doing all that stuff. And even then, even with Uro and stuff, in a commander deck, it's not that bad. It's
yeah,
not gonna break the game.
yeah.
And it's fun, man. It's like forcing you to play with trash and good cards and make the best of it. It just feels like Commander did when we were starting out, right?
That's exactly what it feels like to me. It's I still remember the group that I started playing Magic with. We were like, okay, we're going to buy 12 booster packs, right? And
Mm,
that's what we get to work with.
yeah.
And no more. And then someone, of course, went and bought Antiquities packs, and they're like, oh, come on, that's not what the hell. Oh no, Arabian packs, because I think he had taken his Arabian cards out of his deck, so we wouldn't know that he had bought Arabian packs, but left a desert in by mistake in his lands. And we were
Oh.
like, what is that? What did you add cards? That's it. I'm going to add cards too to my,
Oh
and
no.
that was the end of the nuclear treaty, right there.
Desert of all
It's
cards.
like, yeah,
God,
desert.
man.
Yeah.
We played anything back in the day. Look, whatever we had showed up in the deck.
Right.
Chisholm Gin, baby. The card wins games. Dude, let me tell you the most degenerate start I ever had in 1994, or like that my friend played against me. It was the worst ever, right? Like he puts out Bayou, and then he goes like Bayou, Dark Ritual, Soul Ring, Juzum Jin. And I'm like, okay, well that sucks. And then next turn it's like, oh not Bayou, it was Badlands, so it was red black. The next turn
Okay.
he's like, he puts out like the Taiga, and then somehow or another, it ends up basically being like, I hit you, Judum Jin, Berserk, Fork, GG's. And I'm like, what the
Yeah.
hell, man? Like, okay, I'll take 20th. I've got like 2 mountains and a prodigal sorcerer, I guess.
No bloodlust berserk.
Yeah,
I
it was
always
just
take
over.
that
It was
combo.
like, okay, that's my face, I guess. Thanks, buddy.
I like killing people with like a bloodlust double berserk bird of paradise or something. You know,
Oh my
that's
God, dude. Oh, so what was the most, of all the pro tours you've been to, what do you think has been like the most exciting, like, final that you've gotten to see?
wow.
Or like the most
Uh,
memorable?
Certainly Luis Scott Vargas versus Gabriel Nassif is pretty outstanding. Uh, uh,
God, Nassif is such a good player.
Autumn Burchett. Um,
Oh
that was
yeah.
just that was my last pro tour too. I mean,
Mm,
last pro tour I've been around some of them, but it
yeah.
was my last official pro tour as a member of the coverage team, which was what a great moment to go out on, right? Like
Is
just
that
what
the
a
one
great.
where Emma come running out and
Oh
gave him a
yeah,
hug and it was like, oh God.
yeah,
And that Autumn's deck was nasty too. That
yeah. It was
mono
just
blue just
yeah, just great
ugh.
play, great games, great top eight. Um, Javier Dominguez winning Worlds was pretty amazing. He like I just I cheer for players, right? For me, um, the thing that
How about Reed winning, man?
I was so psyched for Reed. Holy cow, that was a long time coming. Um, Healy
Yeah.
winning worlds. I always get deeply invested in the players. I did a lot of stuff with coverage, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed text coverage a lot. I think an underrated piece of Magic history is a lot of text coverage, but from the point where we started going over to like video started to dominate, you know, um, I I was okay. I felt like I was okay in the booth,
Mm,
but for me, the thing that I really love about that time doing coverage was being a storyteller
mm-hmm.
and being a story facilitator
Yes.
for people who were there, whether it was people getting to the Pro Tour for their first time or people finally breaking through to the top eight. Like the moment where I got to interview Calcano when
Yes.
he finally made a Pro Tour top eight after so many years of grinding and near misses.
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
That's just like a really special moment for me in Magic, and that's not a story you get to tell looking through the porthole of the coverage booth.
Yes.
You get a little locked into like just what's in the feature match area, and so I really um, that was what I enjoyed the most.
Yeah,
And
honestly, I
I
think
think
that was like
when you ask me about a favorite moment, those are the things I think about. I think about Martin
right.
Mueller cursing. I think
Yeah.
about Chris Calcano at that same Pro Tour breaking through into the top
Oh
eight.
man,
I think
Mueller.
about Steve Rubin winning the Pro Tour and talking about opening the door to talk about where he made a mistake in the top eight and explaining his thought process about allowing himself a mistake,
Yeah.
and that's how he dealt with that. He's like, I'm going to make mistakes, right? Those are the things that I loved.
I think that was
Um,
the thing that I think you brought the best to the Pro Tour itself was the fact that you gave us more than just like gameplay. You gave us characters to follow. You gave us storylines to follow. You gave us a reason why this specific match that we're watching should matter beyond just his match, but like the grand context of it. Because I think that's one of the things that like, for instance, Cedric is so good at doing is like building story arcs that we can latch onto and give us a reason to keep watching the Pro Tour. And I love that. I think it like humanized players and it gave us
yeah,
cool reasons to do things. I wish like I wish we'd been able to get more of that for like the international players and stuff. But I know it's hard because like language requirements and things. But I just it's so much fun. It's so cool to sit and learn about these people. It's like that's what makes the Olympics cool, right? Like
Right.
not only is this person the best javelinist in the world, but like you learn about them living in Latvia or whatever the hell is going on, and it's just rad.
One of my favorite things was covering the World Magic Cup, which was an event I loved, absolutely
Mm,
loved. Um, was talking to oh no, my brain is not going to give me that. I think it might have been Stepan Suchik. Uh, just talking about how the Serbian and Croatian players at the World Magic Cup had rented a house together to play test,
that's wild.
and you got to keep in mind that this is literally one generation removed from
The
their parents.
war.
Yeah, their parents being at war with one another, and so and him talking about how they're like, okay, mom, I'm going to, wherever I'm going to Vienna or wherever it was, to play in the World Magic Cup, and like saying like, yeah, and we're in a house with the Croatian team, and like their parents being like, they're good, like
They're
kind
going
of
to
like
kill
like
you.
they murder you in your sleep. And they're like, no, mom, these are my friends. These are, and the role Magic played actually for that generation in terms of because there was one game store that was like near the border, and players would cross over all the time to play, and it was just like I love stuff like that, right? Like this idea that just like um yeah, it was just
Seriously.
it was just amazing to me.
And it's wild because like they share a language, they share a culture. I mean, they pseudo share a language. I don't want them to get angry at me, but
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's just like it's so wild that you see where magic can cross these kinds of boundaries, and I don't know. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me to like watch this stuff sometimes,
yeah,
and I love it, especially like in Europe where it's so small and there aren't that many players, and there's only like one or three stores in maybe your locality, unless you're in like Germany or France or something, and it's so cool. It's like that's the sort of thing that gives me hope, despite like all the stuff we see on the internet. That like magic does build communities and does bring people together in a way that other things can't, because we have to train, we have to play, we have to like keep playing with each other, and it helps break these sort of barriers. Because when you know someone, it's hard to hate them unless they are just an abhorrent individual, right? And it's like, okay, well, at least then we know,
yes,
and then we don't
yes,
play with you anymore. Um,
right.
so have there been any decks that you've wanted to like that you've seen in pro tours that you wanted to build into like EDH decks or commemorate in other ways, like we were talking about that cube earlier? Like, what do you think of the
Yeah.
favorite decks you've seen set up jam
So
against?
I mean, it's something I talked about with you, I think, on
Yeah,
this podcast. Or you
must
have
have
so
been.
many podcasts. Was my Estrid Commander deck
Yeah, we talked about that
when I was still
either
it
on this
was
or on Commanderin back then.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it was a deck that was really inspired by Gab Nassif. One of my first times on the actual Magic coverage team, like as a member, was Pro Tour Yokohama, which had back then, before they would do a Pro Tour, they would do a special tournament called the Masters Series,
Mm.
where like it was sort of like a way to augment the Pro Players Club. Like there's a number of different ways that Wizards tried over the years to support players who were their superstars. And so the top 64 players would play in this special event with a different format, which, is never a great idea to make players have to think about two formats. But, and it was, I believe, extended. And Gab Nassif was just playing this Argothian Enchantress commander deck that I fell in love with, and there were a bunch of great decks there, right? Like, there was Pattern
Enchantress deck, not
Rule,
commander deck.
Enchantress deck. Sorry, it is a
Yeah.
commander deck now.
Yeah.
Um,
Mine too.
and yeah, and and just doing all this like super cool stuff, and ultimately defeating his enemies with Words of Wind, bouncing all their permanents,
That's
and
such a when you taught me of that combo, I did it once against someone, I felt so bad afterwards. Words of Wind is
Yeah,
such a mean card.
it really is, because you know you're basically, you play an enchantment with, like, let's just say two um, enchantresses in
Yeah,
play.
you get a
You have
couple of draw triggers off
two
those.
card draw triggers. You keep one trigger to draw another card to keep digging, but you also bounce a card, and so now you bounce, a cheap enchantment that you're going to replay, and you started doing stuff to untap and tap your lands, or you have a cradle and you keep replaying a cradle because you have,
Yeah.
something in play that lets you put extra lands into play. Yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah, it
it's
gets
delightful.
stupid. It's
And
such a
with
filthy
Estrid, it's
card.
really stupid, because with Estrid, you can, use Estrid, tap all your, the only auras in my Enchantress deck are land auras, right?
Hmm.
They're
Like
fertile
wild growth and
grounds and
friends.
overgrowths and wild growths. And so you tap all your mana, you play a spell, you untap your lands now with Estrid, you play a spell, you do the things, but the permanent you bounce is Estrid,
God
which
damn it.
costs 4 to replay from your hand. You replay it from your hand, and you go and you can do that, and you make infinite mana, and then you win.
Estrid is such a Estrid's +2 is untap every permanent you control. I mean, enchanted permanent you control,
Enchanted permanent, yeah.
which is just in an enchantress deck. Gross. It's gross.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a reason
Yeah,
why I
no,
took
it's
Tuvasa instead to be my leader instead of Estrid, because she was just like she's too much. Um. Anyways, man, before we like, I've always wanted to ask you because like every time we talk and we're always talking about magic and stuff, like I hear about your past with comic books, and I'm like, wait, this dude has been doing like stuff for way longer than I expected, and you've been like part of that industry for way, way longer than like magic even. Like, so when did you? Okay, I need to know, dude. Like you, because it feels like you've always got a story about comic books and like the industry of comics. Like,
yeah.
and you're like, yeah, you were a publisher, and I know you were most recently a publisher, but when were you a publisher before? Like, how
So
did you? I mean, I'm not going to ask you how you got into comic books. That's called being a child in America. Like, uh, but but
um
how did you get into the business of comic books?
I was in high school, and I decided I wanted to work in comics. Um Largely because I had stories I wanted to tell, and that seemed to be the fastest route for me to get to tell those stories. But also because I had read Marvel Origins, Son of Origins, Bring on the Bad Guys, and the Marvel Superhero Women, which were these trade paperback collections of Marvel superhero origin stories. Uh, but in fact, I have those books right there on my shelf.
Mm,
And they had this interstitial content from Stan Lee, where he
mm,
talked about all the people that worked on the books, and what was, what we, we wanted to create a character, and I was thinking about the Spider, the pulp character, and Steve Ditko said this, and Jack Kirby said this, and this person in the bullpen did this. And I was like, oh wait, people make these things. Oh, there's a lot of, this is cool. And everything for me is about community, right? Like,
mm.
and so it was like, oh, and it was this sense of like a tribe of people who make comics, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
I I want in. And so I got a job working for a comic book company that was in my neighborhood. Um, and basically, when I was in high school, I had an idea for a comic, hired some people to do it, and started a publishing company called Eternity Comics.
In high school?
Yeah,
That's crazy, man. Like
yeah.
most people in high school are not that motivated to be able to sit there and say, "I'm going to actually just legitimately just do this."
I kind of needed to be motivated. I mean, honestly, like it was a little bit of like, uh, there was some invention, but there was some necessity. My dad was really, I didn't have any money growing up. I was a pretty poor kid, and
Mm,
my dad got really. We thought he was going to die. He fortunately lived, many more decades before we lost him, but he couldn't work, and um I needed to figure something out. And
sure.
the options for someone in high school job wise were, you think the minimum wage is bad now, you know, it was like I don't know, $3 or something. It wasn't gonna, working at McDonald's wasn't gonna help, and so I needed to figure something out, and so that's what I did. I started writing comics, and and started my own company, and yeah, was
That's
doing that for a
wild.
number of years.
You know what's weird? What I didn't realize is that your company also published the Robotech comic books back then.
Eventually, it did. So
Eventually, right?
I started the company. There was a lot of again, as a kind of hapless teenager. There was a lot of drama and stuff that went on around it. Eventually, I chose not to move out to California and sold my share of the company. So I don't think I was there. I
Oh,
might have still been. I might have had a little bit of. I don't think I was there at that point. I had.
when Malibu took over or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I was like the 17-year-old executive vice president of Malibu, but whatever for a little while. But eventually, we everything. In fact, it was so funny. I had a car packed and was ready to move uh, to California for that, and then I don't the roots, the roots of the old trees in New York all kind of reached up and wrapped around my ankles, and I couldn't do it. So
I mean, dude, it would be very hard for me to imagine a BDM living outside of New York general vicinity.
yeah,
Like,
the,
it
the
just seems like,
megapolis of New York.
yeah, like, I cannot imagine you being like a SoCal BDM just hanging out in the beach or anything. That seems really weird.
Yeah, that was ultimately where I think I ended up as well. So and there was there
Yeah,
was there was a girl involved too. So it was
I mean, there always is. But then,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah, so you left that business. That's how you ended up opening up Neutral Ground?
Eventually I went from there, did work for a couple of other comic companies along the way, did a little stint in public relations, which
Mm,
was working for a couple of major PR firms. Eventually ended up at a nonprofit agency. I hated public relations, by the way. Freaking hated it. It was evil, right? It was just like evil, pure and simple, eighth dimension, et cetera, et cetera. Like um and so I took a lot of the lessons I learned from those jobs, took it to this place called the Parks Council, which was a nonprofit agency that was fighting to preserve open space in New York City, which
mm.
was super cool, and got to go butt heads with a guy named Donald Trump a couple times. It was like trying to, like, he's like, I want to build buildings here. We're like, we want to have parks there.
What if we
you know,
didn't, man?
yeah. What if there was light over Manhattan instead of shadows? What about that? Um, and but really missed comics and decided I wanted to get back into comics. And the way I had gotten into comics originally was by working in a comic store. So I was like, I am going to go to work for a comic store. I'm going to literally take the
You
whatever
just pay
menial
cut?
job I can, like working at a comic shop, and eventually and very quickly that evolved into me running all their events, because again, coming from this public relations background and marketing background now, I started. So we were running these huge signings, like the Jim Lee signing for
Sure.
Wildstorm, and the Rob Liefeld signing around Youngblood, and Bone signings and Madman signings and all this other stuff. And at some point, Magic came out, and
Mm.
so it's very, and so while I was trying to do comics and kept continuing to do them throughout, but I was like, oh, Magic. Oh, we should run an event around this. And so we ran a Magic event, and
Weren't
that
you,
was
like, one of the first real Magic events to ever be run?
I
Or in
so
that list?
so in '94. I mean, Wizards had run events, right? Wizards
Yeah.
had run a World Championship in '94,
Mm.
but that was a tournament, right? Like it was we're gonna have a tournament, and I think there was a tournament in San Francisco called Manifest, which was also in '94, might predate us, and I think is probably very similar in a lot of ways to what we did. But um, but I know that in retrospect. And so we basically ran an event. We came up with a schedule of events. We had a main event, but then all sorts of we basically did the first side event schedule. We had artists at the event. again, coming from a comic convention background now, I wanted to create that convention experience. So we had, Melissa Benson, Ed Beard, Jeff Menges, uh, and Quentin Hoover was one of our early events, but I don't remember if he was at that first one. And dealers, and the idea of like that idea of a dealer's room. So
Mm,
and we did that in November of '94,
that's ins-
and
that's
it was
before like half the country even knew what Magic was.
yeah, yeah, and it was wild, right? I always talk about this. There were people who met at that tournament who got married. There were people at that event who got married. There's at least one couple of those people who are still together and have a kid who now plays Magic, right?
That's
Like,
crazy.
right? It's insane. Um, yeah, it was pretty wild, and so like my every time I would attempt to go back into comics, I would get
Some
pulled back into Magic, right? Same thing, right? In when we closed Neutral Ground, I'm like, I'm going to write comics. I was doing some work for Marvel. I had written an issue of Captain America. I had created a set of comic characters called the Craptacular B-Sides, and I did a mini series for Marvel around that. And then when I announced that I was doing that, Aaron's like, "Oh, you should come write for our website," and that just pulled me into this whole new sort of direction with Magic for many years. You
That's
know,
wild, man. Like, but I mean, you've become so synonymous with the game over the course, like for so many generations of players, and it's just like when you were like, yeah, I'm stepping back away from Magic, and I'm like, are you though? Like, can you? Is that even possible? And like, I don't know. I'm glad that you haven't like departed entirely, like that you still hang around the zone a lot because I find a lot of value in what you have. And I think you're really cool and one of the most important resources and just people in the community. And
oh, thank you.
it makes me happy to see you still hanging around and knocking around with the old dudes and stuff. I mean,
I'm, I'm
now like
I'm
look at me,
lightly
I'm just
unemployed at
doing
the
this.
moment, so
Yeah, you got a
I
lot
have
of
a
time
little
on
bit
hands.
more. I have a little bit more time. I have a
Yeah,
little
I
bit
mean,
more
look,
time
I'm
for me.
glad that you came to Commander, man. It's so much fun. Um, okay, so before we wrap up, though, I want to ask you about a thing that just came out, man. Did you get to see the new Spider-Man?
I did. It was
Is it not the
phenomenal.
coolest goddamn movie?
It is so good. It is so. Um, I am rendered inarticulate trying
Like,
trying to talk about it. It does so many things. I need to go see it again. I haven't had the chance
yeah,
yet. I really need to see it again because there's so much stuff happening in all quadrants of the screen at all
there's so much
times.
text on the screen that I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know where to look. It's so good.
yeah, yeah.
I
And
don't know.
it's like a love letter to the creative teams that created all these different characters, and um,
And
it,
just
it it just Spider-Man to me is this from an era before comics embraced um, the diversity that it embraces today, or is growing to embrace more. Spider-Man was a character I think that every person could, and this is I think with I could be Spider-Man, right? Like
mm,
the mask, I could be Spider-Man, right? You don't have to be
yeah,
Peter Parker. You could be
right.
Spider-Man. And it was, I think there was, it was always such a universally loved character with these universal struggles, right? Like the tropes of Spider-Man are so powerful.
Mm,
The idea of power equaling responsibility,
yes.
and about finding your way. It's one of the reasons I don't love the um, Tom Holland first two Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, because I felt
Mm,
like they stripped away a lot of the autonomy from the Peter Parker character, like to figure things out on his own, right? Like to I mean, I talked about it like where I was like, oh, I need to do something extraordinary to help take care of my family when I was in high school, right? Like obviously, like to some extent, that notion was fueled by loving Spider-Man comics. And
right.
by the way, I got to meet Steve Ditko
That's
shortly
crazy.
after I got into comics.
That
But
must have been amazing.
amazing, scary. He was a trip. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the movie is so much to so many people
Oh god,
and
dude.
encompasses um, such an arc of the character. Yeah,
Let me tell you, man.
I loved it.
I took my son to see it, and we were sitting there, and then Spider-Man India shows up, Pavitra
Oh
Prabhakar,
my
and he's got a
god.
whole thing, and my kid's like, "Papa, look, he's just like us," and I'm like, "Hell yeah, let's go!" And I'm like, "That's what you do this for. That's why we're here." It was sweet, man. But
Yeah.
I just think the biggest miss in the world is Marvel not putting out like immediately a trade paperback of here are the stories of all the people you saw in the movie. Here's cool comic books or whatever. Like, give me a friggin' Spider-Man India trade, or give me like Spider-Punk. Oh my god, with like the Sex Pistols poster look and everything. Like, what the hell is that? I've never even heard of this guy, and I'm like biggest fan of the world now.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean there's always been a disconnect between publishing and licensing, right? Like, or
Yeah.
publishing and IP. Like, I don't know.
I don't know. If I was Marvel and I'd be sitting there like, we've got the biggest literal movie in the world. Put something out.
And it's not like you didn't know this movie was going to be the
Right.
biggest movie in the world. And everyone at Marvel who saw it knew what
Oh
was
yeah.
coming. Like, screened
Oh,
it. Like,
I don't
they were
know.
like,
That's
you
just
don't even know. They're like, you don't even know how big this is going to be. It's like,
yeah,
okay,
like,
I believe
bro,
it.
come on. Just give me a book. Give me a book that I can give to my kid that he can sit there and say, like, I want to be like that Spider-Man. It's like,
And and the funny thing is, yeah, not a comic book. And I think about my love of comics as a kid. It didn't come from, like traditional comics. It came from those trade paperbacks I talked about. Right?
yeah,
It came from like these, like I don't want to go off camera and pull books off, but like these like paperback. They would cut the comics up and mangle them into like these like pocketbook sized editions. But I loved them, right? Like I could, I read them like a book, right? I could hold them,
yeah.
I could put them in my pocket, I could do whatever. Um, and weirdly oversized treasury editions,
Mm,
like these comic, which were comics, they were like this big,
yeah.
and they would
They're
be
like the
written
side of
on something.
newspapers almost.
Yeah, 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 and those are up there on that shelf.
Yeah.
uh,
I had a lot of those for Asterix and Tintin books back in the day.
oh yeah.
'Cause that was my childhood, reading, like, all these, like, Archies and Asterix and Tintin, all these things that
Oh
were
yeah.
in I don't know, that my parents knew from India or whatever, and they're like, "Here's a comic
I,
book," and I'm like, "Whatever, good
I
enough."
grew I grew up with both of those as well.
Yeah, it's those
Tintin was reprinted, I think, in Highlights magazine
yeah.
or
It
maybe
was
Cricket
cool.
magazine. But
Wow, those are named from my childhood. I
yeah,
haven't thought
yeah,
about those
yeah.
2 in, like, 1,000 years.
There was also, I remember as a kid, I think it was Cricket had like a Lord of the Rings excerpt, like,
That's wild.
right, like the whole scene with maybe it was the Hobbit. I think it actually was Hobbit, right? Isn't there, right, the scene with like Bilbo and Smog and some riddles,
Yes,
right?
that's in The Hobbit, yeah.
That's in the Hobbit. Yeah, it's been a long time since I read them. I've reverted to relying on movies, so I know it can get. But I remember that, and I remember reading that, and then like as soon as I was old enough, I'm like, oh, I'm getting these books, and but yeah, it's funny. Like there's so much about. Yeah, I agree with you. Ultimately, to stay on message, a missed opportunity, I think, by Marvel here to not have a
I don't know.
Spider Punk. I would buy a Spider Punk book immediately, right?
Oh
Like I
my
want to
god, are
read
you
that
kidding?
story. Despite, yeah, I know, and I know one of the guys who worked on the Spider Man India story, Sharad.
Yeah.
I've actually talked to him, and like it's something he was always super proud of, and like and so I'm so psyched for him, so
Oh,
excited.
dude, it looks
Yeah,
so cool. Like, and just seeing that on the big screen next to like real Spider-Man and all these other things, I'm like, I don't know, I felt really cool. I felt like super cool. And my kid was like, "Look, Papa," and I'm like, "Hell yeah, let's go!" Oh man, it's a good time. I love that. But man, you know what? This has been awesome, and I love talking to you. Every time we get to hang out, it's super fun. I mean, cubing with you is always fun, and just chilling and hanging out and playing Magic.
hopefully I'll have my extended cube the next time we do that, and we
Yeah,
can.
dude, that would be awesome. Um, in the meantime, though, I guess we should bring this ship to a close because I can hear my wife is starting to make noises, which means she wants to use the office again. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So if folks wanted to find you and talk to you and ping you and stuff, where could they go?
I'll be just hanging out here at home mixing drinks. No, I'm
Oh my god, dude, your drink pictures are so cool. Like,
Thank you.
what the hell do you do? How are you getting these vibrant, like, magazine tier shots? I don't understand.
My iPhone,
Because like, the
a light
backgrounds are
box.
nutty.
Yeah, it's just like a $40 light box I bought off of Facebook Marketplace. Like literally, it's just like
That's that's so
uh,
cool.
yeah. And then, but I mean, a lot of it is the glassware. Like I've actually started collecting glassware as I become more interested in taking pictures of drinks. But you can find me. I'm on Twitter. I'm at top 8 games, TOP8, the number 8 games. I'm also top_8_games on Instagram. And that's just kind of
Yeah,
where I'm at.
go look at him for drink pictures, man.
I'm probably on Mastodon and Hive and something else too, but I don't use them, sadly.
Yeah.
Gonna try.
Hey, so before I go though, like you've been doing like an off and on podcast with Mike Flores for like forever. It feels like. Are you ever going to bring that back now that
We've
he's
done
like hardcore into pre-modern again?
we've done a few episodes in the last few months. Actually, we've actually been started doing it again. We did a couple episodes, and I think tomorrow we're actually recording our Lord of the Rings set review.
Nice,
So we're
because there's
actually
a
going to do
guy
that.
I've always wanted to meet and I've never gotten a chance to meet.
Oh,
Like,
you should just reach out and just set something up.
yeah, because
He's
like I don't know, he's like one of those other guys who's just been super influential to me for a long time. Like, oh, this dude is just written forever. But
yeah.
anyways, I shouldn't be like adding extra stuff to my outro because I just bad form. But yeah. Anyways, you can find him at Top 8 Games. You can find me at Gearporty Gears, and you can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays, thanks to my editor EK. You can also find me on Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic. We just launched our new Patreon, and you should check it out. And also my Dragonlance podcast, Chronicles of Dragonlance. It's really just a passion project of mine and just fun. Turns out that when I'm unemployed, I've got nothing better to do but talk into this stupid can. So, in any case, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.